everybody. Thanks so much for joining us right here on The Right View. We are joined tonight by the founder and president of Turning Point USA. You know him, Charlie Kirk, as well as the executive director of USA Strong, lawyer Erin Elmore. So guys, thanks so much to both of you for joining us tonight. We're really excited to have you both on. Look, there's so much to talk about when it comes to Joe Biden. I don't even know where to start, but I think we ought to start at the border, because he has an absolute disaster on his hands at the border. His border crisis has continued. It's not being addressed, and it's already costing the American taxpayers an additional, wait for it, folks, $86 million. So thanks to Joe Biden's immigration policy, or lack thereof, the detention centers are now flooded with illegal immigrants, and the American taxpayers are now going to foot the bill for their hotel rooms, totaling, you guessed it, $86 million. It is so crazy. I can't even believe we're talking about this. And guys, that is just to help them illegally enter our country. Now, I want to get both of you to talk about this, but before I do, I want to throw in the fact that Vice President Kamala Harris was asked if she had plans to visit the border, because we have seen what a complete nightmare it is down there, and you would think someone would want to address it. Joe Biden hasn't gone down there. Shouldn't his vice president go down there to maybe get a better grasp on the situation? So how did she respond? By laughing at the reporter and saying, "Not today." So where's the outrage, Charlie, from the Democrats? Why isn't AOC staging a photo shoot crying in front of these facilities? Where are all the woke people on the left that were all over Donald Trump whenever he was in charge of America? And by the way, we had the most secure border in, the past several decades in our country.
Yeah, they see no political benefit to talk about this, so they're just going to ignore it. I remember I think it was Time Magazine. It was a picture of President Trump with a young girl, and it said, "Welcome to America." And you remember that image? It was such a misrepresentation of what was really happening, and it was, quite honestly, it was widespread. I remember the summer of 2018. You guys probably remember it very well, where there were protests in the streets. It was the #1 issue in the country because of something that actually Obama implemented that Donald Trump fixed. All the images they were using were under Barack Obama. And now that very same thing is happening again, and it's complete, total silence from the activist media. And they're going to probably still continue to get a pass for that. But I think people are waking up, I hope. And I think we have to keep on talking about this. But the other thing I'll say is this, which is that Joe Biden will not admit that we have a crisis on the border, because he actually does not believe we have a border. He believes it's a mere recommendation or a suggestion. He thinks that borders are so 20th century and that we're going to have this free flow of people between the two countries. This is something that Donald Trump hit on perfectly, both in his campaign and his successful administration, which is that a nation must be defined by its borders. You must have strong borders, and you must know who's coming into your country and out of your country. And it's almost as if this is manufactured chaos from the Biden administration. I wish they actually wanted to solve it. They don't. It seems as if they want to have millions of people coming into the country for potential political gain. And it's up for those of us that believe in the America First agenda to talk about this and highlight it and hopefully come up with some temporary solutions to fix this crisis.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, Charlie. I think that they see these people as future voters. We know that H.R. 1, this horrific bill being proposed, they want to change the way we vote in America permanently on a federal level, which I don't even know how that's constitutional by any means. But this is what they want to do. They see all these people free flowing over our border. And by the way, has anyone thought of the fact that these people come to America because they want the American dream? They see that this is a land of opportunity and success. Yet if you allow people unchecked to just flow into America, Erin, we are not going to have the same country that it is now. We are not going to have the opportunities that abound like nowhere else in the world, and the freedoms like anywhere else in the world, if we let this happen to America. I mean, it's actually a really scary thing. If they don't get control of what's going on at the southern border, I don't know where the end is. And you see these horrific images of the kids that are being brought to the border. I mean, these facilities are overflowing. We still have a pandemic that the left liked to make a big deal about when it was crowds of people lining up for a Trump rally. Yet you have all these people crammed in facilities that are at like 700+% capacity. They aren't talking about it. It was kids in cages under Donald Trump. But of course, Charlie pointed out the fact it was the Obama-Biden administration that actually built those facilities. And it was Donald Trump that fixed that problem. But the hypocrisy, I think, here is just so staggering. I almost don't even know what to say about it.
It's staggering. It's terrifying. I spoke with a Homeland Security expert yesterday, and what he told me is if you go to Mexico on vacation or for business and you try to come back into the United States legally, it's harder to do so than it is to do so illegally because you need a COVID test. Hundreds of thousands of people are crossing this border illegally. They are being given hotel rooms on our taxpayer dime. They are being given bus tickets. Yes, that's right. They're being put on buses to fan out all over this country. They're not being tested for COVID, yet our schools are still closed down because of COVID. Our restaurants are still closed down because of COVID. Yet this is such a crisis at our border, and the Democrats refuse to acknowledge it. If you look at the statistics from February, well over 100,000 migrants crossed the border. This is an increase for the last decade of about, a 15% increase. It's horrible. It's just not what you want to have happen. I'm sorry, the highest number in 15 years, rather. This is not what we need to have America succeed, especially when people are out of work and struggling for jobs. Yeah. And you know what? Illegal immigration, it actually hurts lower income workers and minorities the most. So truthfully, the Democrats seem to act like they care about those people. That's not true at all. They just want to secure the future for their party and have these people voting Democrat forever. And it's unjust and it's unfair, and it's going to hurt our schools. It's going to tax all of our American people that are working. And this is just not what we need to better our country.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up schools because a coalition of American scholars, policymakers, and concerned citizens are now fighting for traditional civics curricula in K through 12 schools in the face of what appears to be a complete takeover by action civics activists seeking to use their programs to promote left-wing causes. Why? Because the radical left is trying to replace actual education, things that would help children in their future, help them find a job one day and succeed in life, with controversial curriculum like critical race theory. So for people that aren't really familiar with critical race theory, just a brief introduction to it, it's really the belief that America is a fundamentally racist country, that all of our institutions are designed to promote white supremacy. It's really a way to further divide people. It teaches kids to hate their country. And I want to give a shout out to Governor DeSantis of Florida, because he put his foot down last week. Here's exactly what he said. He said, "Let me be clear. There is no room in our classrooms for things like critical race theory. Teaching kids to hate their country and hate each other is not worth 1 red cent of taxpayer money." Couldn't agree more. So is critical race theory in our schools, Charlie, actually more important than learning things that would prepare you for the future? What is going on with this critical race theory nonsense?
Yeah, we've been talking about it for quite some time, and Donald Trump deserves credit. He signed an executive order that was ridiculed by the media, saying that the U.S. government will not engage in critical race theory, especially in the military and the civil service. Of course, Joe Biden undid that as soon as he became president. But Donald Trump was leading on this early, and he deserves credit on that. He was ahead of the curve, and he listened to the experts that understand this, like James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian, and really got into it. Look, we deal with this all the time on our college campuses. We talk about this on our radio show and our podcast. We're actually just going through a multi-state tour right now from Oklahoma to Missouri to Kentucky on campus. And I could tell you right now, students are being propagandized of this belief, and you hit it perfectly, Laura. It's even worse than that. It's also believing that science and math are just constructs of the white supremacist West. You see this from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where they're funding these programs saying that math is racist. They don't believe that there's any such thing as individuals. They believe that we're all just part of our racial identity group. They believe that everything is a power struggle, and the only way that we can right this wrong is to eventually eradicate Western capitalist society and with it dialogue and freedom of speech. It's very radical. It's hateful in nature, and it's become really mainstream. And I believe it's actually an opportunity for those of us that love our country, which is why I was so pleased to see Donald Trump lead on this last year and Ron DeSantis. And I encourage every Republican to lead on this. It's a 90-10 issue. And anyone that believes in critical race theory would actually saying it is bigoted. It cares about people's skin color, not people's character. It misrepresents our history. It has people talk to each other less, not more. It destroys the binds that tie us together. So I encourage everyone to really do your research on this and then stand up against it. So yes, kudos to Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump, and also I talked to some other governors recently. I think you're going to see a lot of other announcements. I've been making phone calls and doing meetings because we need to have a coalition against this. Because if you teach our children to hate themselves, hate each other, and hate the country, you're not going to have a country.
Yeah, well, and by the way, the fact that what you just said, that science and math are evil and racist and we shouldn't be teaching those things. So let me get this straight. They want to have a completely uneducated generation of people that they teach to hate one another and to only judge one another based on the color of their skin. I don't know. I can't think of a worse idea than doing that. And Erin, you and I both have children that are in school. And I got to tell you something. This has been something that my husband and I have talked about a lot. What is it that our children are going to be learning? What schools are they going to be in? And what are they teaching in those schools? As a parent yourself of a school-age child, you must think about this. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us that have children in school. Thank you, Charlie, for all the work you're doing on this. I think that this is so necessary and so needed right now. But do you think about this? Is this something that concerns you as a parent?
Lara, this is utterly consuming, and all of this talk of critical race theory, all it is indoctrination of our children, many of whom have been out of school for over a year now. What they really need is to learn how to read. They need to learn basic math skills. They need to learn science in the traditional way that it should be taught, not critical race theory. Children in elementary school do not judge each other on the color of their skin. They don't understand differences. They are taught to love and to play and to assimilate with one another, and inserting race into these children's minds and brains is not what they need. They don't see things this way. It's only creating division, and it's so divisive. And as a parent, I encourage other parents as well, look into what your children are learning. Ask the principals, the headmasters, the people that are running these schools, what they intend to teach. Just today, now I'm transferring my child to a Florida school, but in the Pennsylvania liberal private school, by the way, that we are paying our hard-earned money for, they are teaching our children that there is a water crisis. And first of all, a third grader, second grader, first grader shouldn't hear the word crisis, because they shouldn't stay up at night worrying about things other than basic math and reading skills, in my opinion. But to be honest, if you look into it, in the United States of America, there is not a water crisis. It's more about how states run these services. So I reached out to the teacher and said, I will talk about building wells in Africa because I think that is a noble endeavor, but to call something a water crisis is wrong. These are just subtle indoctrinations of our children. And that's why, as a parent, you have to look at every piece of literature that is sent home. You have to speak with your teachers, because it is the squeaky wheels that get the grease. And if it aren't for people like us who are going to stand up for our children and stand up for the parents that are silent, that have to be silent because they're afraid to lose their jobs, we do have a voice, and we need to use our voice and be advocates for our children, because if not, America will be a socialist nation and our children will be voiceless, faceless mobs of people, and that's what they want in socialist nations. They break them down. We are just cogs in a machine who are worker bees without opinions, without faces, without values, and we have to stop this at every grade.
Yeah, gosh, here I thought that teaching my child, which I do, my son and my daughter, to treat everyone equally. Gosh, I thought that was a good thing. Guess I was wrong, according to the woke left. Joe Biden's team continues to be at odds, guys, with how the real world works. And most recently, during an interview where Circle Back Jen Psaki noted that businesses do not need to raise the cost of goods to pay more taxes. So I'm trying to figure this out. They want to raise taxes on everybody, but they don't think the businesses are going to have to raise their rates. So where does Joe Biden think they're going to find the money to pay for these new taxes? Charlie, it seems like they're using the same failed logic to defend raising the minimum wage.
That's right. And everywhere the minimum wage has been raised the last couple of years, you see blacks between the ages of 18 and 30 just get out of the labor market. When you raise the minimum wage abruptly and quickly, like they did in Seattle, Portland, or New York, prices will go up. And then you see the workers that are still in entry-level jobs, specifically in minority neighborhoods, they get disenfranchised from the labor market. They go to government dependence. And Thomas Sowell has done some phenomenal scholarship on this, where he argues that the minimum wage is actually the worst thing for low-income communities. And look, this goes to a broader point about the difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Donald Trump didn't have to deliver all the successes that he did for people that never voted for him, that hated him. And he did. He delivered flourishing communities and raising wages and criminal justice reform and prison reform and opportunity zones. Joe Biden actually serves the interest of the American ruling class. So for Amazon, a rise in the minimum wage is actually a good thing. Why? Well, because then all of a sudden all the small businesses can't compete.
That's right.
Amazon can afford a minimum wage hike. They'll get through it. They can totally afford that. Joe's coffee shop or, Linda's laundry shop at the corner, they can't. Their margins are super thin. Not to mention they went through an entire year of lockdowns where Amazon delivered more packages than ever before, and Bezos is worth $150 billion. So Biden's entire agenda is, how do I make my crony corporate donors richer? Donald Trump was never concerned about anything close to that. He said, are the normal people, are the muscular class, are they doing better or worse? That's how he gauged success. And I think we need to repeat that daily. We need to get that into the zeitgeist, because Joe Biden, despite all of his posturing and all the pundits and all of his talking head allies, they actually are representing the wealthiest people on the planet, while normal people are going to get crushed by inflation, by taxes, by minimum wage hikes, by government dependence, by these lockdowns. And a pro-worker agenda is what the Republicans need to embrace. And I'm so glad we at least have some 4 years of a track record to show what it can be, what it can do. Joe Biden doesn't believe any of that.
Yeah, well, so far, only $1 trillion of the $3 trillion in Biden's infrastructure plan would actually go towards infrastructure. I don't know if anybody has noticed that. I mean, by the way, this whole $3 trillion on top of the almost $2 trillion COVID package that we just saw from them, Erin, our national debt is going up faster than ever before. They're just throwing money out for people. I don't understand where they actually think we're going to get this money. It's going to fall on somebody to pay all this off, but they don't really care, do they? Because they just want to make sure that people are under the foot of the government, that the government can take care of everything, that the government can pay for everything for everyone in perpetuity. I mean, that is how you start out a socialist state. That's how you start out dependence on the government. And I guess that's ultimately the goal here.
I mean, from where is this money coming? It's going to be paid for by our children, great grandchildren at this point. I mean, this administration is spending at such a rate that it's absolutely terrifying. And all of these bills don't even help the intended recipients. The COVID bill has 1%, I believe, of the money for actual vaccines and 10% for actual COVID. The rest is special interest and lobbying groups' causes. It's really, really scary. And we think of infrastructure as roads and bridges. That's not what they're doing. It's all about social justice. And the American people really have no transparency here into what is happening. Joe Biden really just wants to kill America's middle class and protect Amazon, Walmart, and those big corporations. Tax cuts for small businesses, that's how you raise the minimum wage. Because when businesses have to spend less on their taxes, guess what they end up doing? They end up paying their workers more, hiring new workers. And that's not what this president cares about at all. That's not what Kamala Harris cares about at all. They are beholden to Wall Street. They are beholden to Fortune 500 companies. They act like they care about the laborer and the workforce, and they don't. They act like they care about minorities, but what we know is if the minimum wage goes up, these laborers leave the market, and then what people do is they hire illegally, and it's a vicious cycle of unemployment. So honestly, what they're doing now is we really need to have some of these Republicans stand up and say, no, we cannot have these bills passed. We need some Democrats like the Joe Manchins and the Kristen Sinemas to say, wait a second, this is not good for our constituents. This is not good for the American people. We need to wake up and realize that these bills are laden with pork and help no one other than special interests, period.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't want to get down too far of a rabbit hole here, but, Charlie, bringing up Amazon was such a good point. It's funny, though, because people are not making the connection with the fact that Amazon is going to be benefited by something like this, minimum wage hike. The problem is that when you have somebody like Jeff Bezos that owns the Washington Post and then can, print whatever he wants. We know that they've hated Donald Trump over there and our entire family from day one because we were a threat to them. We stood to expose how corrupt the whole system is there. The fact that you can have somebody with this much power and this much influence who is supposed to be, reporting the news, the facts, being a journalist. I mean, it's actually a joke, but so many people out there, I think, are just bamboozled by this. They don't see the connection here. But it's really scary when you have this much power by a few people. This is, sort of the path that we're headed down, isn't it?
Totally, yeah. And I think that kind of an unlikely ally in this can be the radical left, because they want to break up these companies for different reasons, for economic reasons. And I sympathize with part of that. I just think that it's not a healthy thing when one man has $155 billion and increased his net worth $35 billion when everyone else saw their net worth go down and they were struggling to survive. And a lot of his company is based on taxpayer subsidized package delivery from the U.S. Postal Service and a kind of nicely created server company, I guess. And so you look at what's happened in the last year, the ruling class has become $600 billion richer, and the ruling class does not share our values. I would kind of just not talk about them if they actually loved America and they were investing back in our country. But the problem is that the people that have gotten so rich and so wealthy in America, they now hate this country. And they invest in causes against our country. You have Zuckerberg that put $400 million in the Center for Technology and Civic Life, the largest private placement of dollars in an election in American history. You have Bezos, you have Larry Page, Sergey Brin. You have these guys that are pumping in billions of dollars, not to mention Soros and Gates. And so we should really stand up against this. And we as conservatives should, of course, understand the threat of socialism, but also there's a threat of corporatism growing in our country. And that's where Donald Trump hit a nerve at the American people. He said, look, I am a candidate who's going to, I care about a pro-family, pro-worker, pro-human agenda, and I have to push back against corporate interests and push back against socialist government interests. I will. That has to be the focus of the conservative movement going forward. I think we're heading in that direction. I think people are waking up. And even if some honest Democrats are willing to go after some of these companies, then I'll be willing to do it. But it seems as if the dominant view of the Democrat Party is basically being a spokesperson for corporate America.
Yeah, it certainly does. I want to get to China because obviously we talked throughout the campaign about what a threat China would be. God forbid should Joe Biden become president of the United States. Well, China is laughing at us. I mean, that's a statement that I don't even think anybody can refute. My husband and I actually talked about this last week on the show, and my father-in-law piled on this past Monday, saying, that China is watching America be bullied by the woke left. Whenever we are so outraged about Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato Head, the Chinese are building factories. They're growing bigger and bigger. They were the only country in the world last year to actually make money. Everybody else, lost money. So it's really scary to see already what has happened with China. And last week, Biden's team faced one of them first. Look, they're such an embarrassment, the Biden team, because we were humiliated as Americans on the world stage at a U.S.-China summit. Now, I don't remember that happening one time under President Trump. He never had, an embarrassing moment like what we just saw. It was so bad, guys, that the Chinese e-commerce platforms are now selling merchandise mocking Biden's team, including, I'm not even kidding, I wish this was a joke, T-shirts with one-liners that they used to insult Joe Biden's Secretary of State, Blinken. So while nations around the world try to recover from the virus that originated in China, and while America focuses on eliminating controversial potatoes, guess what China is doing? Starting their plans for a grand ceremony for the 100th birthday of the Communist Party. So give me your thoughts on what's going on with China. I mean, I feel like this is the biggest threat to America. It has been completely unaddressed by the Biden administration. Erin, and what are your thoughts on what you've seen happen with China so far?
I mean, the American people really need to understand that the Chinese Communist Party wants to destroy us. And they are doing it tacitly, okay? They are not here with guns and bombs. They are doing this behind the scenes and taking us down through our technology by destroying our businesses. They are taking all of our business and taking it to China. And there are two books you must read. You Will Be Assimilated and The 100-Year Marathon by Michael Pillsbury. And in that book, he explains that the 100 years, which is the anniversary right now, is they are slow in China. They are methodical. They are picking away and chipping away at us bit by bit by bit so they can take us over. They hate us. They hate democracy. They hate our way of life. They have concentration camps in China, a la Nazi Germany, of the Uyghurs. This is something that the American people don't see because the Democrats are addicted to China. We need their money that they're supplying to us, to our veins, because they are basically a bigger, better infrastructure than we have. They are going all over the world with our Belt Road Initiative in Africa, in the Middle East, assimilating through all of those countries and sending the Chinese people there to do infrastructure and take over the world. And we are just sitting by and saying, it's fine, don't worry. And that is not true at all. Whether it's Hollywood or our government or our politicians, they just sit back and say, China is not a threat to us. In actuality, China wants to destroy us. And if we are not careful, we are going to be destroyed. And truthfully, part of me stays up at night thinking that the United States is on a hegemonic decline and that it's already too late, because we need people in office. I know Marsha Blackburn is doing really a good job to try to expose this. I know Tom Cotton is doing a really good job to expose this. I know that the state of Tennessee is starting projects that will not allow anyone that coming in from the Communist Chinese Party in their state to have government contracts and things like that. If other states do that, we can start chipping away at this problem. But as of right now, I mean, this is a massive issue that infiltrates every single aspect of our lives. And if we don't act quickly, we're gone.
Charlie, we're focused on Dr. Seuss. We're focused on, I guess we can't say Mr. or Mrs. Potato Head anymore, Potato Head. We're focused on these ridiculous things in America. At least this is what the media would like to have Americans focus on. And yet the Chinese are, to Erin's point, plotting their takeover of the world. And we look ridiculous. I think we look completely ridiculous to people like the Chinese.
Yeah, and I'll go a step further. I think the Chinese Communist Party is behind a lot of this political correct woke nonsense in our country. I think the Chinese Communist Party knows that the woke industrial complex is a far more effective weapon at destroying America than a thermonuclear weapon in the next 20 years. If I was the Chinese Communist Party, I would give money to Black Lives Matter. Are you kidding me? If I was the Chinese Communist Party, I'd give as much money as I possibly could to every single one of these alleged journalists that work for these publications that go after people who love America and want to restore it to greatness. You see, the Chinese, they learned their lesson from the Soviets. Instead of walling themselves off and trying to build their own empire, they said, let's immerse ourselves into the West and use the West's weakness against them, which is also our strength, which is our market economy. So China has always had just this. They have two advantages to bring to the world. They steal because they have no ethics whatsoever. The Chinese Communist Party, they do not care about theft. It's part of their culture. They do not know right and wrong like we do. I wish that wasn't the case, but they're an atheist, godless, soulless ruling class that steals with no regard for right and wrong. Number two is they have a lot of people. It's a labor arbitrage. So 30 years ago, they just went to our ruling class and they said, hey, you guys want to make an extra buck? Come bring all your manufacturing over to Wuhan, and we'll subsidize the move, and you can move that plant out of Ohio and Virginia and Kentucky and Kansas, and we'll partially subsidize it. You got to give us your IP, and you basically have to get in this doing a deal with the devil partnership. And China realized that if they could addict our ruling class with our own dollars, then they could slowly take us over. And Donald Trump was the first person to point this out. He was the first person to run on this. He saw it far ahead of time. He was way ahead of the curve here. He was clairvoyant. He was mocked and he was laughed at. There is even like bipartisan agreement and things that Donald Trump was saying 5 or 6 years ago. I'm afraid it's a little bit too late in one regard, but the biggest issue is this. It's the money flow. China controls our sports. They control our movie production. They control a lot of our universities, and they control our media, and they control our corporations. And so the woke industrial complex and the Chinese Communist Party are kind of tied together. It's a very important point that we must talk about. What Tennessee is doing is really important with Bill Hagerty and with Marsha Blackburn and Governor Lee. But I think we have to go a step beyond that, which is any elected official that is celebrating a Chinese Communist Party moving to America, a Communist Party company moving to America, needs to be called out on that. I think we need to stop all trade with China altogether and sunset them, because that is the only thing that's keeping them alive, is the flow of goods that are coming into America. And so I, like Erin, I'm very worried about where this is going, but I think that if we're able to defeat the woke industrial complex, that will be a blow to the Chinese Communist Party. That right now is their greatest weapon at destroying the West.
It's so scary, and so many people would never make that connection, Charlie. It's a great point, and we always need to keep that in mind. When you in your gut know that something is so stupid and outrageous that you can't possibly wrap your mind around it, think back to this conversation right now, because it's absolutely such a solid point. I want to say thank you to Erin and to Charlie, guys. Thanks so much for being here for this conversation today. It's so important. We're going to keep fighting for what's right. We're all going to keep standing up and speaking the truth. So Charlie, Erin, thank you. And thank you to everybody at home. We will see you next time right back here for more of The Right View.